There is a shark tooth sitting in a display case at the Calvert Marine Museum in Maryland. It is the size of a human hand, not a replica, not a cast. The actual tooth of an animal that once patrolled these same oceans. Hunting creatures the size of city buses. Children press their faces against the glass every day and stare at it. Most of them have no idea that identical teeth are still washing up on beaches a few hours down the coast. This is not ancient history sealed behind museum glass. The Megalodon is gone, but what it left behind is everywhere. And the more scientists study it, the more unsettling the picture becomes. Not because it might still be alive, but because of what it actually was. For decades, we thought we understood this animal. We were wrong. Almost completely. The Megalodon was not a bigger great white shark. This is the first and most important thing to understand, and almost every film, every documentary, every book gets it wrong. Otodus megalodon belongs to an entirely different evolutionary lineage. It is more closely related to a group of ancient sharks called the otodontids than it is to the great white. A 2025 study using computer modeling found its body shape was likely more elongated and sleeker than previously thought, closer in form to a lemon shark than the stocky great white silhouette everyone pictures. The animal that comes to mind when you hear the name Megalodon, that image is wrong. And here's the thing, if our picture of its body was wrong, the questions about everything else it was capable of get a lot more interesting. We have never found a complete Megalodon skeleton. Not one. Sharks are made almost entirely of cartilage, which rots. Over millions of years, it vanishes without a trace. What we are left with are teeth, fossilized, abundant, scattered across ocean floors of every continent except Antarctica. We know how large the Megalodon was primarily by measuring its teeth and scaling up from what we know about modern shark anatomy. The same 2025 study now places the maximum possible length at around 24 meters, roughly 80 feet, or about the length of 2 school buses end to end. The margin of error on that estimate remains enormous because we are essentially reconstructing a building from the door handles. So what exactly are we missing? Megalodon teeth still wash up on beaches today. In 2022, a child walking the shoreline in North Carolina reached down and picked up a dark grey triangle the size of her palm. It was a Megalodon tooth, eroded out of ocean sediment after 3.6 million years and deposited on the sand like a gift. This happens regularly along the coasts of North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, and Florida. Beaches in Morocco produce them too. In some locations, you can find them without any specialist equipment. The teeth are black or dark grey because phosphate minerals replaced the original calcium over millions of years. They are not rare. Megalodon is more physically present in our world than most extinct animals, and most people have no idea. But the teeth are just the beginning, because what scientists discovered inside them changed everything we thought we knew about how this animal functioned. In 2023, a team of researchers published a study confirming what had been suspected for years. The Megalodon was warm-blooded. In the ocean, this is not a small detail. It is the difference between an animal that is fast, adaptable, and capable of ranging across vast stretches of open ocean, and one that is slow, cold, and largely constrained to warm water. The Megalodon's body temperature ran around 7 degrees Celsius, warmer than the surrounding water. For a shark, that is extraordinary. It allowed the animal to swim faster, react faster, and pursue prey into waters where cold-blooded predators simply could not follow. This single trait likely made it the dominant apex predator across most of the world's oceans for nearly 20 million years. And that tells us something about its hunting strategy that is genuinely alarming. The Megalodon's bite force has been estimated at around 182,000 newtons, a figure calculated from tooth size, jaw geometry, and muscle mass modeling. To put that in perspective, a great white shark generates roughly 18,000 newtons, 10 times the force. Fossilized whale bones from the same geological periods show bite marks that match Megalodon teeth exactly. Massive gouges, punctures through bone, several inches thick. Scientists can tell from the marks that the Megalodon often targeted the ribcage and flippers of large whales, collapsing the chest cavity or disabling movement before finishing the kill. These were not ambush attacks on small prey. These were coordinated, calculated strikes on animals that were themselves enormous. Every expert assumed this was simply brute predation. They were only half right. In the Gatun Formation in Panama, researchers discovered something that fundamentally changed the understanding of Megalodon behavior. Concentrated deposits of juvenile Megalodon teeth, small, still developing, alongside abundant fish, remains the prey small enough for young sharks to handle. This was a nursery site. The Megalodon did not simply spawn and abandon its young to the open ocean. It selected specific, shallow, warm, protected coastal waters to raise juveniles, where food was manageable and threats from larger predators were reduced. Similar nursery evidence has since been found in the Calvert Cliffs of Maryland, in Chile, and in Spain. This animal invested in its offspring. It had a spatial intelligence about its environment, choosing locations the way a predator with genuine ecological awareness would, which makes what happened next all the more striking. Around 3.6 million years ago, the Megalodon vanished from the fossil record. The last confirmed teeth date from this period, and then nothing. For an animal that had dominated the oceans for nearly 20 million years, the disappearance happened in what is, geologically speaking, a blink. Almost certainly driven by the cooling of the oceans during the Pliocene epoch, global temperatures dropped. The warm, shallow coastal waters the Megalodon depended on for hunting, for nurseries, for the range of warm-blooded activity that made it so dominant, began to contract and migrate toward the equator. The large whale species it had spent millions of years evolving to hunt began shifting to colder, polar waters. Waters the Megalodon almost certainly could not efficiently follow, but the extinction still has unresolved edges that researchers are not entirely comfortable with. The great white shark did not drive the Megalodon extinct, but it may have tightened the trap. Great whites arrived and diversified during the same period the Megalodon was declining, competing for the mid-sized prey that younger, smaller Megalodons depended on. The Megalodon did not fall to a single cause. It fell to a combination: climate shift shrinking its preferred habitat, prey migration pulling food sources out of reach, and new competition filling the ecological gaps it left behind. An apex predator that had never faced a serious challenger across 24 million years suddenly found its entire world reorganizing around it. What came next tells us something uncomfortable about the ocean we think we know. In 1976, a US Navy research vessel anchored off Hawaii hauled up its sea anchor and found something tangled in it that no scientist had ever formally documented. A 4.5-meter shark with a cavernous, gaping mouth, entirely unknown to science. They named it the megamouth. A large, unmistakable animal hiding in an ocean humans had been sailing for centuries. The oceans today are estimated to be less than 5% explored. Not 5% understood, 5% physically explored with cameras and instruments and any meaningful data at all. The colossal squid was not confirmed until 1981. A species of beaked whale unknown to science was identified as recently as 2016. These are not microbes. These are large animals. In water we have barely touched. The Megalodon is gone. The biology of an 18-meter warm-blooded predator requiring enormous daily caloric intake makes long-term survival in a depleted ocean essentially impossible. The teeth are still out there, dark grey triangles pressed into the sand of a North Carolina beach, waiting for someone to look down at the right moment. 18 million years of dominance. The most powerful bite force ever calculated in the animal kingdom. An animal that hunted whales, raised its young in sheltered coastal waters, ran warmer than the sea around it, and ranged across every ocean on the planet, and we reconstructed all of it from the door handles. We named it Megalodon, meaning big tooth, because for the longest time, that was all we had. Now we know it was warm-blooded, ecologically aware and far stranger than the movies ever suggested. And somewhere beneath water no human eye has reached, in depths that instruments have never lit, the ocean is still deciding what else it hasn't shown us.